Hey everyone, I finished my second semester of occupational therapy school 2 weeks ago, and now I've been on 2 weeks of break, and then starting tomorrow I'll be back for summer semester, which is a little sad but kind of nice. It was a really short break, and it was much needed because last semester was really long and just very draining. So I was thinking back to the end of last semester, and I made a video about whether or not occupational therapy school is hard. And I started thinking about this again, and I thought I'd just kind of give my opinion now that I've gone through this sort of more difficult semester at my school. So, the first thing I thought about when I was brainstorming about this video and thinking what I wanted to say is that this has been an insanely long semester, and I feel like I started this semester like 2 years ago, which is a little ridiculous because it was only not even 6 months ago, but this was such a long semester and it just kept going and going and going. It's one of those like really draining semesters, so it feels like it just drags on forever, and that's because it honestly was a really difficult and challenging semester. Now, last semester wasn't that bad at all. So we had an easy semester right into a kind of a really hard semester, and that was definitely a difficult transition. So as for like each class and how difficult each class was individually, we had anatomy this semester, and although we had, at least at my school, and I think for almost every single occupational therapy program, although we had anatomy as a prerequisite to get into the program, we still take anatomy again. And at first I didn't really understand why, but at least compared to my undergrad with this anatomy I just took, they were really very different courses. My undergraduate anatomy was a pretty general overview over the entire body, whereas this anatomy was mostly muscles and nerves, a little bit of maybe veins and that sort of thing, but really it focused a lot on muscles, their actions, veins, and then it had, of course, we did cover other things, but very briefly, and it wasn't really the focus of the course. So for me, it was a lot of not new material, but a lot more in depth than I had gone at all in my last course. So that was very different and definitely took a lot of time and a lot of studying and a lot of energy, and it was a lot of new material and stuff I had to refresh my memory on, and just a huge quantity. So that was a very time-consuming class, and it was definitely challenging. Another class we had that was also a difficult class this past semester was neurology. No, neuroscience? I never know. I don't even remember what it's called. We always just call it neuro. We had neuro, and that course was easy but difficult. So, like, what the heck does that mean? So the course, I thought, as far as lectures goes, the lectures were difficult. So we had people that were very knowledgeable in their field come in and they teach us about different parts of the brain or different diagnoses, and that was really difficult because they are so knowledgeable and they're telling you a lot of information, and it's sort of difficult to figure out what you actually need to know and what's going to be important for you as an occupational therapist. And so as far as like listening to the lecture and figuring out what we really needed to know, that was the difficult portion of that class. Once you kind of figured out what was really applicable to an occupational therapist, sort of learning that information and retaining it wasn't that difficult. But when you're listening to an expert talk and you're just like, whoa, there's a lot of information coming at me and I'm not really sure what I need to know and what I don't need to know, and I don't even have really a basic understanding right now, and you're giving me all this in-depth, that was a little overwhelming. But as far as neuro went, that was really the only overwhelming portion of that class. We also had environments class, which I'm sure I've talked about before, and I just love that class. It's where we had talked about sort of environmental barriers, things that are outside of the person, so social or physical barriers that make it difficult for a person to participate in activities. So like not having a ramp instead of stairs, so a person in a wheelchair can't get up, that kind of stuff. And I just love that class. I just think it was so great. Definitely probably my favorite class of the semester because it was really just felt so applicable, and you could walk outside the classroom and you could walk around town and realize, wow, this sidewalk isn't big enough to be accessible, or oh, the contrast on this sign isn't good enough. Someone with vision problems would not be able to read it. And so it was so exciting to be able to see that I just didn't feel like that class was a chore at all. And even for people I think that didn't enjoy it as much, I still don't think it was a ridiculous amount of work. The stuff was really applicable, really easy to do. The lectures were interesting, and it just really wasn't that time intensive of a course. We also had contemporary issues, which was just a 1-credit course, so that really wasn't that difficult either. It was mostly just attending lecture, and then we had one project at the end and a quiz, so that wasn't a big deal. And we had fieldwork, which I've talked about in a previous video, so if you're interested, go ahead and watch that video. But really, all in all, each class individually, even the challenging classes, were completely manageable on their own. The problem was when you take all those classes and you lump them together. Oh, I forgot, we also had assessments. Sorry, we had one other class which was called assessments, which is where we learned all sorts of different assessments, which makes sense, that you can do on adults and pediatric populations to figure out different disorders that they might have. And that class was, I actually also really liked that class because that was a class where you could leave and you felt like you had learned something that you could really take into the field, and that was really cool. The one downside, in my opinion, of that class is that we learned a lot of the really in-depth ways to do certain assessments and like all the details, and when you actually are out there, at least from what I've seen from my hours of observation and from field work, you're not always doing it exactly by the book, and the by-the-book method of completing an assessment isn't always applicable in the setting. But otherwise, it was a great class. I do feel like we learned a lot. As far as how difficult that class was, the class we met, the lectures weren't that difficult, and we had time to practice in class a lot of the time. What was difficult about that class is that you really did need to practice these on your own time, outside of just the short amount of time you were given in class, so that you could really understand and successfully perform each assessment. And so that did take a decent amount of time. It wasn't difficult at all, and I thought we learned it really well, but it was definitely time consuming. So that was that class. So all in all the classes together, when you're talking about a time consuming class with assessments, anatomy, which just has a lot of content, neuro, which had difficult lectures, but then once you understood the lectures wasn't that bad, and then our environments and our contemporary issues class, all of them together, it was a really challenging semester. I definitely struggled. I have a whole video I did about, I think, midway through the semester where I was just really having a difficult time. And I'll put a link to that as well if you're interested. But this semester was a tough semester. I'm not going to lie, it was difficult. But I do feel like, obviously I made it through, everyone in my class made it through, and I wish I could say that we had, a lot of balance in our lives and were able to do school and hang out and have fun, but I swear the majority of my class just cracked down and was like, school, school, school this semester, with a little bit of hanging out, but not nearly as much as last semester. So this is just my program specifically, so obviously other programs are going to have different things. But as far as us, this semester was challenging. There wasn't a lot of free time, but we did make it through and it was manageable, so that's good. So anyways, that's my take on this semester. I think, yeah, it was challenging. We made it through. If you're interested in watching sort of where I was when I was having the hardest time this semester, I'll definitely link that video. If you're applying or in school or anything, I hope you're having a great day. I hope everything's going well,